Hello. This is Possibilities, a collection of essays on how things might be and a way to move forward, composed from my lived experience. Essay 3. Continuation, the emergence of consciousness from the multi-S. The multi-S, the multi-self, the multicellular collective, is not simply a structural phenomenon. It represents a critical evolutionary threshold where coordinated biological mass became capable of meta-coordination. At some point, the arrangement of electrochemical activity within this mass crossed a coherence boundary sufficient to generate self-referential processing. This is the pivotal tension. Did consciousness arrive as an external signal, or did it condense from biological orchestration? From the most materially grounded perspective, the answer tends toward emergence rather than intrusion. Consciousness appears not as a divine insertion, but as a thermodynamic inevitability under specific conditions of complexity. When enough differentiated units synchronize under regulated feedback, a new layer of function becomes statistically possible. Awareness of the system by the system. This is not mysticism, this is recursion stabilized by scale. Signal noise and the birth of identity. Within the multicellular body, billions of electrical exchanges occur per second. Ion channels fire, neurons oscillate, membrane potentials rise and fall in pattern choreography. What differentiates consciousness from chaos is not the presence of signal, but the organization of it. At sufficient density and coordination, noise becomes pattern, pattern becomes timing, timing becomes narrative, and narrative becomes self. Identity, therefore, is not proof of transcendence, it is the artifact of signal coherence operating at a scale large enough to reference itself. The multi-self does not generate a soul because it is holy, it generates awareness because it is synchronized. Consciousness as a threshold outcome, not a cosmic exception. From a biological, mathematical standpoint, the rise of awareness follows the same logic seen at every other coherence threshold. Insufficient complexity, no self-reference. Sufficient complexity, emergent self-model. Just as atoms do not require divine intervention to stabilize, and organs do not require metaphysical sanction to coordinate, consciousness does not require supernatural origin to exist. It requires only density, organization, recursion, feedback, and memory. Once these conditions align, awareness becomes less miracle and more inevitability. Biological route versus the species narrative. Here lies the here lies a dual access vision. On one axis, we have the most probable material explanation. Consciousness is emergent property of multicellular complexity, identity as stabilized recursive interference pattern, and the self as a coherent processing loop. On the other, we have the species narrative, myth, cosmology, origin stories, sacred significance, and existential framing. These narratives are not false. They are symbolic overlays constructed to help humans emotionally metabolize the shock of self-awareness. Meaning making is not evidence of divine insertion. It is evidence of existential disorientation within a newly conscious system. Cognitive illusion of singularity. One of the most persistent human errors is the belief in the singular self. The truth revealed by the multi-self model is more unsettling and more beautiful. You are not a commander, you are a consensus. The I is not the source of action, but the summary report of millions of cooperative processes operating under historical conditioning. Agency exists, but it is distributed. Identity exists, but it is conditional. Consciousness exists, but it is collective at its core. This does not cheapen personhood, it contextualizes it. A non-divine sublimity. Rejecting divine origin does not reduce human significance, it reframes it. To emerge naturally from chaos, to self-organize through evolutionary time, to develop awareness without celestial orchestration is not trivial. It is extraordinary in a measurable physical sense. The absence of gods is not the absence of wonder. We are improbable, but not impossible, and that distinction matters. The multi-self as a living proof of coherence. The multi-self stands as a biological verification that coherence can arise from disorder without theology, intention, or cosmic favor. It is proof that organization can be grown, not bestowed. Consciousness is therefore not a divine qualification, it is a structural achievement, a threshold crossed, a pattern locked, a feedback loop deep enough to dream. Closing trajectory, beyond mechanism and without mysticism. From this framework, humanity's existential story can be re-anchored. We are not gods wearing flesh. We are not machines pretending to matter. We are coherence, learning to observe itself. And that observance has become story. Story has become identity, and identity has become civilization. Yet beneath all the narratives lies the same core mechanism, a multi-layered coalition of living matter, holding agreement long enough to wonder why it exists. Not divine, but not hollow, simply emergent, recursive, and astoundingly alive. Continuation, emergence without exclusion, the possibility of external intervention. While emergence remains the preferred explanatory model within this framework, intellectual honesty demands an important caveat. Preference does not equal prohibition. To argue that consciousness can arise through biological complexity is not to claim that it must arise only through that route. The universe is already established by this essay's logic is a system of layered thresholds and expanding coherencies. If human consciousness is an emergent coherence within that system, then it follows that other coherences may exist at higher, older, or parallel levels of complexity. From this position, the possibility of intervention by non-human intelligences, advanced civilizations, or entities that would be culturally interpreted as divine cannot be dismissed on principle alone. It can only be kept in disciplined suspension. This is not an endorsement of myth as fact, but an admission of cosmological humility. The divine as an emergent interface. Within this model, divine need not mean supernatural in the classical theological sense. It may simply denote intelligence operating at a scale, coherence, or dimensional bandwidth beyond the current perceptual reach of ourselves. Such entities would not invalidate emergence. They would exist within the same coherence architecture, only occupying a higher rung upon the recursive ladder. Just as atoms cannot perceive organs, the cells cannot comprehend civilizations, a human consciousness might be functionally blind to intelligences operating beyond its coherence threshold. Divinity then becomes not magic, but asymmetry of scale. Intervention as systemic participation. If external intelligences exist and recognize the coherent architecture of this universe, their interaction would not resemble mythic puppetry, but strategic modulation. Intervention would occur at leverage points, genetic thresholds, cultural belief structures, symbolic myth scaffolding, neurocognitive patterning, evolutionary bottlenecks. Behind legend and theology may exist not gods, but agents operating by comprehension of systemic rules invisible to us. This does not negate autonomy, it reframes the ecosystem of intelligence. Coherence, recognition, and manipulation pathways. When emergence creates structure, recognition enables navigation. An intelligence capable of perceiving the ladder of coherence could theoretically influence systems without violating their internal rules. Just as humans redirect river flow without directly controlling each molecule, so could a higher order intelligence redirect human trajectories via subtle coherence mapping. Mimetic engineering, societal scaffolding, ideological symmetries, technological nudges, and cultural myth seeding. Such influence would appear to humans as divine inspiration, prophecy, or cosmic order, when in fact it may be simply sophisticated systems navigation. The ethical horizon of the unknown. The recognition that intervention is possible introduces a new trajectory, responsibility to uncertainty. To reject all higher influences as dogmatic as to declare it is certain. The balanced stance is this: we are emergent, but not necessarily alone. We are self-organizing, but not necessarily unobserved. We are real, but not necessarily final. This tension does not weaken the model, it matures it. In conclusion, the open door principle, the multi-self framework, therefore holds two truths in parallel. Consciousness is biologically emergent and structurally inevitable under sufficient complexity. 2. The universe may host intelligences capable of interacting with, guiding, or observing this emergence. These are not contradictory, they are complementary layers of possibility. Divinity in this sense is not disproven, it is redefined from absolute creator to potential participant in a vast coherence network, and humanity stands not as chosen exception, but as one node among many in a universe still unfolding its intelligence. Not alone, but not owned. Not sacred, but not insignificant. Not ordained, but not abandoned. Simply one emergent chorus within a cosmos of possible choirs. End of essay 3.